The sun didn't so much rise over Silveridge, Connecticut, as it did reluctantly bleed through a thick, oppressive layer of October fog. For most of the residents in this affluent suburb, it was just another Tuesday, a day for commuting to the city or taking the kids to private school. But for me, it was my 42nd birthday. I woke up at 5:30 a.m., a habit carved into my soul by decades of building a business from nothing. But as I rolled over, my hand met only the cold, taut fabric of an empty bed. Elena hadn't come home. Again. The indentation on her pillow was gone, smoothed over as if she had never existed in this room at all. I stayed there for a moment, staring at the ceiling, counting the cracks in the crown molding. 20 years. I had given that woman 20 years of loyalty, of late nights at the office, mine of missed dinners so she could have the life she always dreamed of. And this was the dividend on my investment. A hollow house and a heart that felt like it was being squeezed by a cold iron fist. I finally pulled myself out of bed. My joints felt older than 42. I walked to the master bathroom and splashed cold water on my face. The man looking back at me in the mirror was a stranger. There was a jagged scar running from my temple down to my jawline, a souvenir from a childhood accident that I'd always been self-conscious about. My eyes were tired, framed by dark circles that no amount of sleep could fix. I looked defeated. I looked like a man who had already lost a war he didn't know he was fighting. Before we go deeper into this story, take a second and hit that subscribe button, give this video a like, come on, and let us know where you're watching from. I'm curious to know how far these stories travel. I walked downstairs, the hardwood floors of our custom-built colonial creaking under my feet. The house was a monument to success. Marble countertops, a wine cellar, a sprawling backyard with a pool that stayed covered for 6 months of the year. It was beautiful, and it was a tomb. I sat at the kitchen island in the gray dawn, waiting. I knew she'd be back eventually, even if just to change her clothes. At 7:15 a.m., the front door clicked. It was a sharp, metallic sound that sent a jolt of adrenaline through my chest. Elena walked in, looking like she'd stepped off a runway, despite having been out all night. Her blonde hair was perfectly styled, but her eyes were glassy, and she smelled of expensive gin and a heavy, masculine cologne that made my stomach turn. It wasn't my scent. My scent was cedar and old books. This was something aggressive, something like Marcus Thorne would wear. She didn't even notice me at first. She tossed her designer clutch onto the marble island, and it hit my coffee mug with a dull thud. She jumped, finally seeing me sitting there in the shadows. "God, Julian, you scared the hell out of me," she snapped, clutching her chest. "Why are you sitting here in the dark like some kind of creep?" I took a slow sip of my coffee. "It's my birthday, Elena." She stared at me for a beat, her expression shifting from shock to a cold, bored indifference. She didn't offer a happy birthday. She didn't offer an apology. Instead, she let out a short, jagged laugh that sounded like breaking glass. "Is that today? Jesus, Julian. Do you want a medal? You're 42, not 5. Stop acting like a kicked puppy and get a life." She stepped closer, her heels clicking aggressively on the floor. The mask of the perfect wife she wore for the neighbors was gone. In its place was a woman I didn't recognize. A woman filled with a deep, inexplicable venom. "You call this a life?" She gestured wildly at the kitchen. "Being married to a man who's half dead. You're a bore, Julian. You're a burden. I look at you, and all I see is a mistake I've been making for 15 years. You think I want to be here? I stay for the lifestyle, not for the man with the scarred face who mopes around the house." The words hit me harder than a physical blow. I felt the air leave my lungs. "You're cursed, Julian," she whispered, leaning over the island until I could see the contempt in her eyes. "When everything you touch turns to ash, well, you're a loser, and quite frankly, I hope you rot in this house alone. Happy birthday." She turned and marched up the stairs, the sound of her footsteps echoing like hammer blows against my heart. I sat there for a long time, the coffee going cold in my hand. Cursed. The word rang in my ears. If I was cursed, it was because I had allowed myself to be. I didn't go to work that day. Instead, I went to my home office and locked the door. I pulled a hidden floorboard from under my desk and took out a burner phone and a thick manila folder. I had been prepared for this. I wasn't the pathetic loser she thought I was. I was a man who understood leverage. I had hired a private investigator 6 months ago. So the folder was filled with high-resolution photos of Elena and Marcus Thorne in various states of intimacy. There were records of the secret accounts Marcus had helped her set up, accounts filled with money stolen from my own firm. But looking at the photos wasn't enough anymore. Seeing her contempt this morning had changed something inside me. Divorce wasn't enough. I wanted her to feel the exact moment her world collapsed. If you were in Julian's shoes, facing a situation like this, what would you do? Would you just walk away, or would you wait for the perfect moment to strike back? Share your thoughts in the comments. Disappearing is harder than it looks in the movies. To the world, Julian Vance was a man on the verge of a total public breakdown. I made sure of it. I started showing up late to board meetings with disheveled hair and coffee-stained shirts. I let my emails pile up into the thousands. I was feeding the narrative Elena had created for me, the image of a man who was finally, inevitably, turning to ash. Meanwhile, in the soundproof basement of our home, far beneath the feet of my cheating wife, I was liquidating my life with the precision of a diamond cutter. I sold off stocks in untraceable increments through shell companies. I moved crypto assets through private mixers. I was essentially committing financial suicide as Julian Vance, while a man named Silas Sterling was being born in a series of offshore accounts in the Cayman Islands. Elena didn't notice a thing. She was too busy living her second life. Marcus Thorne had moved from being a business associate to a permanent fixture in our home. I'd watch from the upstairs window as his silver Porsche pulled into our driveway the moment I left for work. They thought I was too broken to care. The clinic was located in a remote part of the Hudson Valley, a private facility hidden behind a wall of ancient oaks. Dr. Eris Thorne was a master of the human canvas. "You're sure about this, Julian?" he asked. "We're altering the bone structure of your jaw and removing the deep-seated scar tissue that's defined your face for 30 years. "I want to be a man who controls everything," I said, lying back on the cold table. The recovery was a descent into a private, white-walled purgatory. For 3 weeks, my head was wrapped in heavy bandages. I lived in a darkened room, the pain a constant, throbbing companion, but I welcomed it. I spent those weeks in total isolation, listening to recordings of vocal coaches. I trained my voice to drop into a lower, more commanding register. I practiced the mid-Atlantic accent, the voice of old money, educated and impossible to place. Before we continue, take a second and share your thoughts so far on this story below. I read every single one. Do you think changing one's entire physical identity is a fair price for justice? The day the bandages came off was the second birthday of my life. I walked to the full-length glass and gasped. The man looking back wasn't the kicked puppy Elena had mocked. The jaw was sharp, masculine, and aggressively defined. The scar was gone, replaced by smooth, healthy skin. My nose was straight, lending an air of nobility to my profile. But it was the eyes hidden behind temporary, icy blue contacts that changed everything. I looked formidable. I looked like a man who had never known a day of pity or weakness in his life. I wasn't Julian Vance anymore. I was Silas Sterling, and Silas was a predator who had been hungry for a very long time. I didn't go back to the colonial house. That place was a relic of a dead man. Instead, I rented a high-security penthouse downtown. I hired a stylist to curate a wardrobe of bespoke Italian suits and watches that cost more than Marcus Thorne's entire car collection. I spent the next month seeding the market, making high-profile, aggressive trades under the Sterling name to get the local business journals whispering about a mysterious Chicago investor. One evening, I decided it was time to show myself. I went to the vault, but an exclusive cigar lounge where I knew Marcus frequently held court. I saw him walk in, his arm draped over Elena. I waited until Marcus stepped away to the bar. I walked up beside him, the smell of his aggressive cologne hitting me. This time, I didn't flinch. I smiled. "That's a fine choice of scotch," I said in my new resonant voice. "But if you want the real Pete, you should try the 82 Special Reserve." Over the next 2 weeks, I played the part of the bored, wealthy disruptor to perfection. I invited Marcus and Elena to dinner at the most exclusive restaurant in the state. I watched as Elena's eyes roved over me throughout the night, completely oblivious to the fact that she had shared a bed with this stranger for 15 years. Mr. Sterling, she purred, leaning across the table until the candlelight caught the sparkle of the diamond necklace I had bought her. What brings a man like you to a quiet, settled place like Silveridge? I like quiet places, Elena, I said, letting her name roll off my tongue with practiced charm. They're easier to take over. Most people here are asleep at the wheel. They don't realize how quickly a life can turn to ash if the wind changes. She flinched at the word ash, but she didn't see Julian. She saw a bigger boat, a faster car, a richer life. The plan was a masterpiece of financial engineering. I convinced Marcus to lead a hostile takeover of a subsidiary of my own company, a subsidiary I had intentionally loaded with toxic debt. I can put up 50% of the liquid cash, I told him, my voice tight with artificial sincerity. It can be, but I need to see skin in the game. I need to know you're committed. I watched as Marcus looked at Elena. She nodded, her eyes bright with the fever of the hunt. She wanted the penthouse. She wanted the Sterling name on her luggage. We'll do it, Marcus said. We'll leverage everything. The firm's capital, the home equity, the personal savings. We're all in, Silas. As I walked out of that office, I felt a surge of cold, dark joy. They weren't just betting on themselves. They were betting their entire lives on a ghost who had finally come back to haunt them. Before we go deeper, I would love to hear your point of view. Tell me what part hit you the hardest in my story and share your thoughts in the comments. Over the next few weeks, I began to play with Elena's mind like a virtuoso with a violin. And I invited her to lunch at a bistro in Greenwich, a place where Julian and Elena had celebrated their 10th anniversary. I used specific phrasing that Julian used when he was nervous, a slight tilt of the head, a specific way of folding a napkin. Is something wrong, Elena? I asked. No, she said, her voice trembling slightly. It's just, you remind me of someone. But that's impossible. He didn't have your presence. Most people only see what they want to see, Elena, I said, holding her gaze. Your husband, Julian, wasn't it? Perhaps you never really looked at him at all. The Silveridge Founders Gala was the crown jewel of the social season. I arrived in a black-on-black tuxedo, a silhouette of shadows against the glittering gold of the ballroom. I didn't need the blue contacts anymore. I wanted her to see my eyes. Elena was there, us draped in a gown of liquid silver. Marcus was beside her, looking haggard, his hands shaking as he held a martini. Mr. Sterling, Marcus exclaimed. We haven't seen the confirmation yet. The bank says the funds are in transit. That's because they are, Marcus, I said. They've transitioned from your control to mine, permanently. I turned around slowly. I reached up and wiped away the temporary bronzer. The thing about curses, Elena, I said, my voice returning to its natural tone, is that they only work if you believe in them. I stopped believing in yours the moment you walked out that door on my birthday. The room went dead silent. Elena's glass slipped from her hand, shattering on the marble floor. Julian, no, that's impossible. You're different. A little surgery, a lot of spite, and a reason to live, I said. Sit down, Marcus. You're broke. The merger, it doesn't exist. The shell company, it's owned by the Vance estate, which you just signed all your assets into. Every friend and neighbor Elena had spent years trying to impress was now staring at her as the federal agents stepped out from the shadows. Marcus Thorne, one of them said, you're under arrest for wire fraud, embezzlement, and securities violations. Julian, please, Elena sobbed, reaching for my arm. I didn't mean it. Marcus manipulated me. We can go home. There is no we, Elena, and there is no home. The Silveridge house was seized an hour ago. Your clothes, your jewelry, it's all being processed as evidence of the money you helped Marcus steal. The fallout wasn't just a quiet legal proceeding. It was a public dissection. I sat across from Elena in a room that smelled of stale coffee and old paperwork. She looked smaller, her expensive jewelry gone, her designer clothes replaced by a generic tracksuit. She tried one last time to use the charm that had kept me captive for 15 years. Julian, think of all we built. she whispered. "The nights in Paris, the house in the vineyard. You can't let them take it all. I can help you testify against Marcus. I have the files he hid." "You don't understand, Elena," I replied, leaning into the light so she could see every line of my new face. "I don't need your help. I am the files. I was the one who fed Marcus the numbers that led him to the ledge. I was the one who let you believe the curse was real so you'd stop looking at the man behind the curtain." Before we continue, want to take a second and share your thoughts so far on this story below. I read every single one. The trial of Marcus Thorne was the scandal of the decade. He was sentenced to 12 years for a laundry list of crimes. Because of the evidence I provided, Elena was charged as an accessory. She avoided prison by testifying against him, but the price of her freedom was total insolvency. On the day she was evicted from the Silveridge Colonial, I was there. I watched her carry 2 battered suitcases to a waiting taxi, the same driveway where she once told me I would rot. "You look different," she said, squinting at me in the harsh daylight. "Not just the face. Your eyes. They're cold, Julian." "They aren't cold, Elena," I replied. "They're just clear, for the first time in 15 years. And I see things exactly as they are. I sold everything that smelled of Silveridge. I took the capital I had secured as Silas Sterling and moved west. I found a property on the rugged coast of Oregon, a house made of glass and cedar perched on a cliff. I started a small, private investment firm that focused on ethical tech. I began to heal, not just the scars on my skin, but the ones on my soul. I didn't want a city, I wanted the horizon. I wanted a place where the air was clean and the secrets were buried under the Pacific tide. It's been exactly 1 year since that birthday. My face in the glass door reflection is familiar now. I don't see a stranger anymore. I see a man who survived a fire. My phone buzzed on the table. It was a text from a woman I'd met at a local bookstore. Someone who knows me as Julian. So are the man who likes the rain and quiet mornings. "Happy birthday, Julian. Looking forward to dinner tonight." I smiled. The curse was finally broken. The story of Julian Vance isn't just about a cheating wife. It's about the moment we decide we are the architects of our own lives. Thank you for staying with me through this long and winding journey on family secrets and revenge. This project was one of the most intense narrations we've ever produced, and your support is what allows us to keep telling these cinematic stories. If this story resonated with you, if you've ever felt cursed or undervalued, please share this video with someone who needs to hear it. Don't forget to like, subscribe to Family Secrets and Revenge, and hit that notification bell so you never miss a chapter. Most importantly, share your overall thoughts in the comments below. I read every single one, and I want to know, what would you have done if you were in Julian's shoes? Until next time, remember, the best revenge is living well. Stay safe, stay strong, and we'll see you in the next story.